Hi everybody, it's Katie back with another episode of my vlog, and I thought today I would do my Shibori 101 tutorial. So many people have shown interest in my masks that I've been making and in the general process of using Shibori binding techniques and indigo dye to achieve results like that. So I'm going to do my beginner's tutorial today where I talk about 3 really easy binding techniques that you can do and what tools and materials you need to get started. Let's check it out. All right, guys, let's talk tools and materials for a second. We are preparing to dye, and so it's important to know about the fabric that you're dyeing. I use 100% cotton quilter's fabric. It's made by a company called Robert Kaufman. The brand I like is called Kona Cotton. It's Robert Kaufman's line of just solid, high quality quilting colors. And I just buy the Kona white. You can also buy, there's a whole bunch of shades of white. There's bone and snow and a bunch of other things. And they also make a product called Kona PFD, which means prepared for dyeing. And PFD products don't have optical brighteners and sizing in them the way that other fabric will have already included with it. I don't even worry about the PFD product. I just go ahead and buy regular Kona white. It's easier to find. It's available more places. And I just make sure to wash it on hot and dry it before I use it. That gets any chemicals, residues, sizing, brighteners, whatever, out of the fabric, and it, gets it ready to be dyed. Again, you can just buy prepared for dyeing cloth, but I just go ahead and hot wash and dry everything before I use it. I also iron my fabric. It's pretty important to get the wrinkles out for some of these binding techniques. The first one I'm going to show you, it's kind of silly that I ironed the fabric, but I'm the type of person, I go ahead and pre-wash and dry and iron everything before I do it. So that is the fabric that I'm going to be using. You can also use any of these techniques on a plain white cotton t-shirt or any other 100% cotton fabric. I would not recommend using another fiber other than cotton if this is your first time dyeing. You can dye other fabrics, but it starts getting trickier and you have to use different techniques. So all the techniques I'm going to show in my Shibori tutorials are all based on using cotton fabric. And again, I pretty much only use Kona cotton, the white color. So that's the fabric. The other things I'm going to use in today's tutorial are rubber bands of various sizes. These are actually the rubber bands that come with the indigo dyeing kit that I showed you guys when I talked about indigo dyeing. I also have a couple different weights of thread. I use polyester thread and cording for my binding because it does not take the dye. And so when I have to take all the bindings out at the end after I've dyed and rinsed everything, it's kind of a big wet fabric mess. And the easier it is to see the thread that I used to do the binding, the easier it is to remove it. So that's why I use those. You can go ahead and use anything though. I mean, literally anything that you can tie around something else is fine. But I use polyester threads, and I use heavy duty threads because I tend to pull on my thread pretty hard, and I've had the disappointing experience of having a thread break when I was in the middle of trying to get everything, under the right tension for my design, and then had to redo the entire thing. So those are the threads that I use. I also have some small smooth pebbles on the table. These are actually from my brother's wedding a few years ago. They were part of one of the centerpieces, and they are just the perfect size for doing the particular technique that I like to do. So I've saved them, and I just keep rinsing them off after every time I use them. And it's kind of cute because it's a little sentimental bit when I'm working on my projects. And the other thing that I have over here are net bags of some kind. This is recycled. I don't even know what came in this bag, but it's some product that I bought somewhere that came in a net bag that's sealed up on one end. You can use orange bags, any kind of produce that, onion bags that come in that type of thing. The other thing I like to use sometimes is just a cheap linen laundry bag from, where did I get these? Oh, Dollar Tree. It's like you get 3 of them for $1. So they're great. They're super cheap, work fine. I can use them usually for 1 or 2 dye sessions, and then they start to break. But again, I got it 3 for $1, so not a big deal. But this one is free, so free is even better than 33.3 cents. So that's the basics for the binding techniques I'm going to show you right now. So let's get into it. I'm just going to shove these things aside. Oh, sharp scissors, always a good one. I'm going to shove these aside, and the first technique I'm going to show you, I don't even think this has a name, and I apologize for the size of the sample that I'm showing you, but I've actually used up all the other fabric I have with this particular pattern on it. This is what I refer to as the random pattern or the blue cheese pattern. The thing I really like about this one is it looks cool on both sides. Unfortunately, sometimes that means you have to pick and choose between two different sides, and it might be hard to pick. The other thing I really like about this pattern is you get these random shapes in the pattern, and they start to, it's almost like looking at clouds. I start to see weird faces and shapes. I sometimes refer to these things as ice demons because they kind of look like guys that have been, like, you know, frozen in ice. So the way that I make this is kind of comically easy. I literally just crumple up a big piece of fabric. Of course, it's not just crumpling a big piece of fabric. It's a little more complicated than that. But let's get a big piece of fabric here and see what we can do. So with dyeing, any fabric that is in the middle, that is inside of something else, won't be exposed to the dye. So if I was to just crunch this up into a ball with a bunch of it in the middle, like that, what I would wind up with is a big blue spot on my fabric, and then everything that was on the inside will pretty much just stay white. So that's not a very good way to do it if you're trying to get a cool mottled effect with lots of different variations in it. So what I like to do is I like to start in the center and kind of scrunch the fabric like this, like I'm making a flat surface that's got a lot of wrinkles to it. And just kind of crunch it up, and depending on how big the piece of fabric is, it can get a little trickier, but you can see I'm kind of opening it and making sure that no piece of the fabric is really getting caught inside any other piece of the fabric. I'm kind of just crunching it all up on itself. Keep turning it, keep crunching it. I might have used too big of a piece of fabric here. This one does get tricky once it gets kind of big because depending on how big your hands are, obviously it gets harder and harder to hold this into the shape that I'm making it into, okay? So there's kind of halfway crunched up, ready to be put into the die. Now, how the heck am I gonna get this into a shape that it's gonna stay in inside the dye vat? Well, I'm glad you asked. That is where our net bag comes in. So I'm just gonna give this a few more crunches and really get it kind of wrinkly and scrunked up. And then I'm gonna get my net bag, and this is where it gets a little tricky. Sometimes I'll ask James or one of my other kids to act as a studio assistant, because you gotta kind of get a real hand on it and then start it into your net bag. And you want it to stay as crunched up as you can on the way in, but again, you don't want to fold it as it's going in. So I'm shoving it up against itself. I'm making as many creases and crinkles as I can as I'm putting it into this net bag. I'm trying to maximize the amount of exposed surface area. Of course, I've been doing this on one side. Now that it's most of the way in the bag, I can actually flip the whole thing over and check the bottom. Uh-oh, there's a big part that's gonna kind of block other things. So I can scooch it to the side, just kind of undo some things and crunch them in there a little more. The more folds, the more little crenellations, and you know, it's kind of like your brain, right? You want a nice wrinkly brain. You don't want a smooth brain, as my kids like to say. Smooth brain is stupid brain. So once you've got the whole thing in there, then you can really start checking it out, making sure, again, you don't want it like wrapped up in a ball. You see all those different weird little layers and things in there? All right, so now I want to make it tight, and I want to try and get it kind of compacted into this hockey puck shape as well as I can. And then I gotta finish it somehow. And if I pull on this netting too hard, I've learned I will actually break it, which is stupid. So I'm gonna put a little clip on there for a second. Oops, I didn't tell you guys to have clips, did I? Guess you need clips as part of your equipment also. Take a rubber band. And really, I mean, like, honestly, look, you could use a twist tie, right? But I just twist it up, twist it back on itself, and then close it off with the rubber band so it can't come undone. And that is it for this design, if you can believe it. All you need is for the whole thing to kind of stay together on its multiple trips through the dye bath. So again, that is going to yield a fabric that looks something like that. We're going to see these are the places that are the outermost part of the fabric. These are the places that are the inside of the fabric where it's really not seeing much dye at all. So this guy is pretty much ready to go. Easy peasy, right? Told you I'd give you guys the easy one first. And it's really one of my favorites. All right, pardon that quick edit. I had to change the camera angle because I realized I needed to be a little bit more up here for this one. This is the one I like to call a target, of course, or concentric rings. This is a really basic technique that I'm sure you guys have done if you've ever done a tie-dyed t-shirt before. It's really easy. We're just going to use rubber bands to make the concentric rings. It's all in the setup of how you lay the fabric out. So I have here a blank piece of white fabric. It's a big square and I've folded it in quarters to find the center. That's where the two folds meet. Since I've found the center, I go ahead and open it. Kind of keeping that center pinched or just keeping my eye on where it was, right, when I had it folded up. So now basically what I want to do is I want to pinch it right in the middle and I want to lift it up. And then as I'm lifting it, you see how it's trying to kind of go back into those four major folds? I don't want that. I want different pleats, right? So as I lift it, I'm going to kind of adjust the folds of how the fabric is gathering itself together. The whole deal with these Shibori techniques is you control where the pleats are, and that kind of informs where the color winds up being. Everywhere that is a high point here is going to wind up blue. Everywhere that is a valley or a low point in between these folds is again not going to catch as much dye, and it's going to wind up more white. So you just kind of keep lifting that up, making sure your pleats are laying the way you want them to, and gathering things together into this kind of ghost shape, I guess. Stalactite, stalagmite, I don't know which one's which. Anyhow, once you have that basic shape, you want to grab some rubber bands from your rubber band pile, and wherever you want, you could put them really close together. The one that I had done before, you can see quite easily how many different rubber bands I had on there and how close together they were. You can do them further apart if you want a more spaced out look. You can put them at kind of uneven intervals if you want something that looks a little bit more like that. I'm gonna just trap the two ends that I've got going here before this whole thing floofs out when I let go of it. So now that I've got it kind of more managed there, I can get a little bit more exact with how my pleats are lying, which part of the fabric is maybe lying on top of another part in a way that I don't want, and get that really dialed in to how I want it to be. And then put that rubber band on there nice and tight. I don't want this coming undone in the dye bath. So like that. Then I'm going to do the same on this back end. You can go all down the length if you want, or you can start at each end and then split the difference in the middle. It really doesn't matter. I kind of was just going to do this back end to kind of keep it a little bit more under control. You might have to rearrange your pleats though later if you do it that way. So maybe, you know what? I'm going to change my mind right in the middle of my own tutorial. We're going to do this middle one next. So that happens sometimes. Even in a project, in a tutorial, in life, you just change your mind part way, do it some different way. The really cool thing about this Shibori technique, or all Shibori techniques, is there's some elements of control and there's some elements of chaos. And there's some ways that you can kind of make it go a certain way, and then there's other ways that it just does what it wants to. And I love it. I love that random element. I love kind of not knowing what's going to happen sometimes. This is the outside of the circle. This is the biggest circle I can make on this square of fabric. I can see I'm very close to the edge of the fabric right there. So that's kind of the limiting factor. Now I can keep putting more rubber bands down at the end and it'll just keep making stripes. This one that I did before there's no rubber bands after that final circle one. You can see the outside corner here is just blue, but you get those really cool things like I was talking about with the crumpled one, where you get these cool effects right at the edge, right? Oh, it looks so awesome. I love this stuff so much. Anyhow, we could throw this in the dye bath just like this. I'm gonna go ahead and put a few more rubber bands on it just to add some more visual interest. I'm gonna go ahead and grab these guys right at the end and throw them together. And I'm gonna go ahead and use some skinnier rubber bands to get some stripe variation, all kinds of different ways to do it. And again, in the end, you're gonna have to either remove these by hand when this fabric is all wet, or you cut them out. That's what I do. I just use scissors and cut them as I'm rinsing everything out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do one more on here, kind of close to another one, so I get a more, not such a uniform stripe on this one. I like the general looks of that one. That's gonna make some interesting, you know what? I'm changing my mind again. I'm gonna do two more close together down here and see what happens, because I kind of like that. Seeing what those close together guys get me. I've done this pattern so many times, it's kind of funny. It's, like I said, it's always the same, but it's always different at the same time. So go for that less uniform look on this one. And that I'm gonna call done and ready to go in the dye bath. Now, we can also use the same technique without making a circle, of course. You can take a piece of fabric and kind of, this will be sort of a mix of the two techniques I just showed you. If you just take a rectangular piece of fabric and kind of pleat it and bunch it up, gather it up, but don't let it all be on the inside. Again, you want a whole bunch of fabric exposed on the outside. You see all those pleats? Those are gonna be some awesome blue stripes. So I'm gonna go ahead and rubber band this. I'm gonna have to fix my pleats in a second, obviously, because I just let the whole left side, well, left side for me, I guess it's the right side for you guys, go. The cool thing is they should mostly retain their shape down the length. And I'm gonna flip this around because I'm right-handed. Sorry guys, I can't do that rubber band with my left hand. I can do a lot of things left-handed, but that is not one of them. So, do it like that. And again, I could literally just go throw this in a dye bath just like this, and it would get some cool effects. You can tell how I'm gonna have some blue stripes on one side and some solid blue. Uh-oh, look at the back. It's all closed up. Gotta open that and get those pleats showing also. So there's cool pleats showing on both sides. So this will actually be kind of a cool, this might actually make a cool checkerboard pattern, because we're gonna have the blue stripes running this way on the fabric, and then the white stripes are gonna be running this way on the fabric, right? Oh, I like how this one's coming out. All right, and then again, you know, you selectively poke pleats back into the inside or whatever if you want that part to be more blue or more white, depending. And it's really fun. The first time you try doing shibori techniques or indigo dyeing, really play with some different, you know, try scrunching one thing really hard and try not scrunching another thing up at all. And just see what you get after you dye it, because it's always a little bit of a surprise. And as soon as you've done some of these bindings and then you've done the actual dye process and you see what you get, it kind of clicks the thing in your brain and you go, oh, okay, I get it. That's gonna yield this. This technique's gonna yield this result, right? So should we stop there? Or should we keep going? Oh man, I always wanna keep going. Oh, something else you could do, you could just fold it in half right in the middle and put a band around that. That's gonna give a totally different effect, right? No idea what that would look like. Ooh, let's try it, let's find out. Let's do both of those, let's do this. We won't do the middle. Open the middle up a little and then fold it. Look at that, that's gonna give some nice results. That weird little swirl that I just made there. Ooh, that's gonna be cool. All right, so I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna take a big rubber band and go right around the middle. We're gonna see what we get here. This will be cool. All right, let's call that one done. Oh, I'm so excited about this middle part right here on both sides. Looks like it's gonna come out really weird and cool. Should we tie this guy's feet together also? Let's leave it like that. It's gonna be interesting. I like that. All right, so there's two that are pretty interesting. Let's do one more technique on this video and then call it quits for this tutorial. But I'm gonna come back next week and show you guys my favorite of all. Let's save it because it's a little more complicated. The next one I wanna show you guys is these little bubbles. That's the one that uses the rocks, okay? So each one of these bubbles represents one of these rocks. You can probably see pretty easily how there was a rock here. I put it in, I pinched it, right? And then I did a rubber band underneath. So it makes kind of that shape, and you can see pretty easily how the part that's wrapped over the top of the rock winds up dark blue. That's the center of the circle. And then the part where the rubber band was winds up being white. This one, this kind of the XL one, I started with a rock in the middle, and then I basically did this technique where I pulled it up, and then I added 2 more rubber bands underneath to get those concentric circles. All right, so let's take a look at what that looks like going down. And I'm not gonna do this whole one because that would take a very long time and this would turn into the world's longest tutorial video, but I'll just give you guys a quick peek at how I start one of these ones. So we'll just grab ourselves a little handful of rocks here, grab a little handful of rubber bands, and like I said, you just wanna put a rock wherever you want a little splip on your fabric, gather the fabric around, and get it with that rubber band underneath. And then you can see it's creating all these interesting little pleats where the fabric is trapped by the rubber band, and that's what's gonna lead to these kind of interesting shapes where it's not just an even circle, right? Those are the pleats from the way that the fabric was gathered up. So this one is a fun one to do with little kids. If they can handle doing that rubber band move, they can handle putting this one together. Depending on your kid's attention and patience level, it might get boring fast. I don't know. I set James up with doing this once and he had a blast doing it for like an hour and a half one day. So gotta kind of go around a bunch of times with these rubber bands. If you got even smaller rubber bands, you wouldn't have to go around so many times, but there's kind of the, can you guys see that? Fabric on the table. There's kind of, you're getting the general idea. You got to space them a little bit apart, otherwise it gets hard to put the rocks in. But just grab it, pinch it, put that rubber band over it, and just loop it around, you know, a few times to secure it. And the way to tell if it's on there tight enough is obviously if you just kind of give it a pull here after you're done. You can see really easily if they're in there tight enough. So I'm sure you guys can imagine what this fabric is gonna look like once I've done the whole thing with these little rocks stuck in the fabric, making little, again, they're like little ghosts there, or maybe nipples, I don't know, depending on your frame of reference. All right, that's it for my basic Shibori technique tutorial. Tune in next week and I'll give you guys the scoop on how to make my favorite binding, which is the spider web, this one here. And if you guys like that and we keep going, I can even show you how to do the teeth design that everyone seems to like so much and more. As usual, let me know down in the comments section if you have any feedback or questions, or you can always email me at katie@goblincode.com. Thanks so much for watching. I'll be back in a few more days with our Cinema Club Sunday Roundup.